Hello everyone. Today's video is about hell. Nah, it's really about God's love and whether it's unconditional or conditional, because there are a lot of people who still hold on to this dualistic idea of good forces versus evil forces, and the ultimate judge, God, who is only a force for good, will, if you believe the right things, if you act the right way, you'll either be lifted up into heaven or kicked off the ledge into hell for eternity. Because if we're ever really going to heal ourselves, if we're ever really going to heal this world and reach our potential, this is something that has to be addressed. It has to be part of the healing. We have to have a new understanding, a higher understanding of these concepts. Otherwise, we're going to keep fighting each other. So many wars, so many conflicts, so many, even on a smaller scale, so many families have been torn apart because, there's very devout believers and many zealots who look at these teachings from their religion or their belief systems, and they take them to heart, and they take them very literally through a particular lens of viewing things. And I know I was raised Catholic, and I went to many different churches though growing up, and I saw different levels of teachings, and there were some that focused on God is love. Jesus said God is all loving, all merciful, but all of them still, to some degree, and some of them focused on it more than others, looked at the rapture, and looked at hell, looked at apocalyptic times, or and many felt called to be these evangelical bringers of light to to those who are still in the darkness. And but it didn't come from a place of real love. It came from a place of, you're going to burn forever unless you believe what I believe. And they tried to force their beliefs on many others. Now it's more extreme, but many, the Crusades, many different wars and conflicts have been done with this as a central theme of it. And a lot of people have been burned at the stake, stoned, shot, killed, crucified for not conforming to these beliefs and these perspectives of things. And so I really want to talk about whether God's love is actually conditional or unconditional, because there's a lot of people who are very close to God, very close to Jesus, and I really am looking more at like the Christian side of things, because that's sort of my background and what I've experienced, what I'm familiar with. And they come across as wonderfully intentioned and they want to be wonderful followers. They want to practice their faith. They want to put it into practice, not just be believers, but make it actionable as part of their life. And they want to be the love that Jesus was. They want to emulate that. They want to replicate that as best they can. But they still hold on to these ideas that, the fundamental belief that to them is that, if you accept Jesus and God into your heart and you commit to that belief that that's what saves you, that that's what grants you eternal life, that that's what makes you good. And meanwhile, if you either don't pay much mind or, don't make a choice or outright reject God or Jesus and the religious beliefs, that ultimately in God's eyes, that makes you bad. And that means you're going to burn forever. It's like, Jesus did say, like, God is all loving and all merciful. And then they also look at it as if God's like, you're standing on this little ledge and God's judging you at the end of your life. And it's like, well, you didn't believe the right things. I love you, my child. Believe me, this hurts me more than you. Boom. Burning forever, eternal punishment, eternal hell, eternal suffering with the devil and the demons, forever tortured, separate from God. And my question is, how is that all loving and all merciful? And it's funny when you ask a lot of Christians and believers and religious people, like, do you think that there's a time where God doesn't love you? And they're like, no, of course not. Like, God always loves me. Jesus always loves me. He's always accepting me. He's always asking me to come and spend more time and put more focus and believe stronger, have a stronger faith. And yet there's so many other conditions where they look at other people and different belief systems and different ways of being, where they're like, I guess there's no point where God doesn't love me. And I suppose that's true for them, but if they get to the end of their life and they didn't believe the right things, that's where God's love ends. But if God is love, how could there be a point where God's love ends? Is it all merciful? All implies 100%. Literally 0% of the time does God's love fail or end. It's never. It's not possible if you're actually believing the words of Christ. It's not possible for God's love to end. And also, we look at, Satan obviously corrupted those minds, corrupted those souls, and, he won that battle. But if you look at, like, how many people are Christian in the world, there's only, 1.5, 2 billion, something like that. There's 8 billion people. So that means, the devil's winning that battle, 4-1, or 3-1, it's like, is that really, how much are we diminishing God's power and greatness by thinking the devil is this much better at saving souls or taking souls than God is at saving them? And so I want to present some different perspectives, some different ideas. Truly, if God is all loving and all merciful 100% of the time, then that means there are no conditions to which God's love is not present for each and every one of us. We are all children of God. This is a core teaching as well of the church. We are all children of God. Jesus called us brothers and sisters. He didn't He wasn't superior. He never asked people to worship him, ever. Not even once. He didn't want it. But we've idolized him. We've turned him into an idol in many ways. You know, and I do believe that Jesus was God. But I believe that his message was of oneness. Brothers and sisters implies that we are the same. We are on equal level with Jesus when it comes to our worth, our value. It's not about superiority or inferiority. If there is a devil, if there is an evil force, that's the force that wants us to believe somehow you can make your way into being superior, or that somehow you're inferior. That's the force that would want you not to question things. That's the force that would be afraid of you looking at things more closely. That's the force that would want you to stay in your comfort zone, in your bubble of what you believe, and not face your fears, and not test your limits, and not expand. Love is expansive. Love never ends. It's limitless. It is unlimited, which means it's forever expanding. And if God is love, and we are created in his likeness, then that means we are love too, which means we are meant to continually be expanding. But if we get stuck in certain perspectives, and there's certain beliefs that we won't look at, if there's certain aspects of ourself that we won't look at because we're afraid, or because we think it's wrong or evil, or that's what the devil wants us to do. I feel afraid when this happens. That means it must be evil. What if your understanding of fear is just not expanded yet? What if fear is actually pointing you to where you go? And that's where we have to look at emotions. What are emotions? Are they a sign of what's good and bad, of what's right and wrong? Or are we more intelligently designed than that? I've gone down this rabbit hole very much so in my own self-reflection and self-discovery process. And I found a very different outlook on emotions that makes more sense, that feels more right to me. God is all loving. God is love. Love does not deny others. It does not deny or reject life. And emotions are a very potent, important part of being humanity and being alive. So to me, emotions have become a barometer, a measure of whether I'm in alignment with my highest good, and if I'm perceiving the current situation in my highest good. So when fear is present, it's a sign that I'm not perceiving this situation in love. If love is the highest form of being, and if God is love, then it must be the highest form of being. Then there is a perspective here. It doesn't mean, fear doesn't mean, oh, that's evil, or that's the darkness, and the darkness is bad. That's not what fear is. Fear is pointing me in the direction of where I need to look and examine further. Fear is pointing me in the direction of where I can expand, where I can gain more compassion, more humility, more love, more peace, more understanding of who I am and the truth in all situations. Fear is pointing me to where I don't understand truth yet. And truth is loving wisdom of the highest order. That's what truth is. And you can feel it. You can actually feel it. If you learn that there are no bad emotions, that emotions are just teachers. Emotions are just for teaching you truth, your truth. And if you look at a belief, like when you think about hell and the devil and evil and the things you feel shameful about or guilty about or bad about, what you consider to be bad, is that really how it is? Is the fear, is the shame, is the guilt, is that pointing you in the direction of something evil or wrong or bad? Or is it just telling you that you're not perceiving this through God's eyes, through the eyes of love? When I am learning something new and going outside of my comfort zone, I will look at many different perspectives. If I'm looking at something through fear or anger or doubt or any of these things, and I really start to ponder, why do I feel this way? Why does it look this way to me? And eventually, every single time, if I give it enough, if I'm patient enough and look with the intention of understanding and coming to a higher perspective of it, without fail, I am led somehow, some way to a better perspective. And then I can look at the same thing that used to cause fear and doubt or anxiety or overwhelm or any of that, and suddenly there's a peace towards it. There's at least a neutrality towards it at a certain point, and then I'm able to upgrade to a loving perspective. And it's because I've stopped labeling my emotions as good or bad, and instead realized my emotions are all here to help me. God is love. You are intelligently designed. Your emotions, your body's emotions, are not bad. They are not warning you of evil. If they are warning you of anything, it is that you don't yet understand this. Think about fear. Think about anything you've ever been afraid of that you eventually overcame that fear. What was the difference between the version of you that was afraid of it and the version of you that wasn't afraid of it? It's always your understanding and experience of that thing. Used to be afraid of the dark, grew up, faced it, sat in it, felt it, not afraid of the dark now, most of the time. Afraid of heights. You go up somewhere tall and you stand there and realize you're not really afraid of heights, you're afraid of falling, by accident. But if you stand up there and you just breathe and you feel the fear moving through the body, you feel the bodily sensations, and you don't judge it, you just feel it, and you let it pass eventually, and it will, If you just sit there and breathe and focus on the breath, focus on the feelings in the body, not on the mind and its thoughts, and you just sit with it, feel it, eventually you're not afraid of it. And this works for everything. Going, speaking in front of people, meeting new people, driving long distances, or, it could be anything. It could be anywhere. Trying different foods, it's like trying new things. We're always afraid of expanding. The mind, the ego, is afraid of expanding because it has this limited view, this limited perspective that we've been raised with, that we're physical beings, that, the danger could be around any corner, that others are a threat in some way, or certain situations are a threat in some way. We've learned fear throughout our life. We've been taught that fear somehow keeps us safe, or that if we avoid fear, that somehow we're keeping ourselves safe. But fear does not imply safety. The only thing that might imply safety, if that's even a real thing, is understanding, is love, compassion. There are some people who don't want to go to bad parts of towns or be around like homeless people because they're afraid of, being robbed or mugged or raped or any of these things. And I get it. We've all heard stories about those things, but then there's also people who willingly, happily, lovingly go to those places and meet with those people and help them and love them. And they live long lives. And so what's the difference between them and you? It's only their perception of these things versus your perception of these things. And if you changed your perception to match theirs, perhaps you would then feel the same way. And it's not that we can't be careful or cautious or discern. Part of evolving as a person, maturing as a person, is learning how to discern where you should go, who you should work with or interact with, all these things. But if we just put these blanket generalizations on things that we're currently afraid of, we'll never see the love that's present there. And if love embraces and accepts everything, then so does God. And what if some people's journeys are not to believe, to remain skeptics? If we all believed the same thing, we'd just be one hive mind. There wouldn't be any individuality. There wouldn't be any semblance of self. But then we also have to realize everything comes from the same source. Everything comes from the one infinite, eternal thing. There's nothing, it's not God and his box of creating materials that are separate from him. And you're made of the creating materials, and if God likes you enough or thinks you did good enough, suddenly he's like, oh, in the middle of eternity, which is eternal and doesn't actually have time, you've been made eternal. If you're part of the eternal thing, the only eternal thing, being a child of God means you're a part of God. Doesn't that mean you're already eternal? That was never in question? And for us to even have these experiences, to learn these lessons that are so unique, because if you really think of things through oneness, through the unity that everything is God, then the only reason we'd be having an experience like this, where there's duality, where there's the appearance and the feeling of separateness or the illusion of separateness, the only way we could do that is through unconditional love. Allowing us to go through and choose which lessons we are learning, to choose what kind of life we live, to choose any perspective, any belief, to go down any rabbit hole, to believe and do whatever you want or what you think is best for you. To have these unique journeys you can only do that through unconditional love. There can't be conditions to it. And honestly, any parent who really loves their child, they'll tell you, I could never punish them forever. It doesn't matter what they did. I will always love them. It made me a little emotional. I don't even have any children, but not in this lifetime. But there's nothing that you could do where a truly loving parent would punish you forever. So why do we make that a quality of God? Why do we interpret things that way? Why do we believe what we're told about that by these certain authority figures and church figures and stuff like that? I mean, these beliefs go back to a time, they became foundational during a time when the church charged you to have your sins forgiven. This goes back to a time where the church fought, and I don't even like saying the church, because truly the church is the people. The church is the children of God. The church isn't a building or one authority or something superior, and then they put down their beliefs and their dogmas and all these things. That's not what the church is. The church is the people. So really, we're just looking at the people who have assumed power in these institutions, who for thousands of years have had to maintain these same beliefs that came from a time where people were treated terribly, where people were killed for not believing the right things. And even though that church, that authority may be different now than it was, to different degrees and stuff like that, it doesn't mean that those beliefs are just so foundational. If you actually listen to Jesus' teachings, he never says God burns people eternally for not believing in me. He doesn't actually say that. Ever. We've just assumed it from all these other Old Testament stuff and some New Testament stuff, but we've looked at things through this lens of there's God and he's fighting the forces of evil, and that we have to do that as well. But what if evil is just a reflection or a consequence of us not knowing who the fuck we are? What if this idea that we're somehow separate from God and that we have to earn unity with him, what if that's what creates evil? What if us thinking that we don't innately have any value or worth, that we're not infinitely and eternally loved, that somehow we have to achieve that in some way? What if that's what produces evil? Because I tell you, the people who do evil things, who really hurt others, they're all traumatized in some way. None of them know who they are. They rise to power through their traumas, through anger. They fearmonger. They push fear. They want you to stay in fear. They want you to stay in these little bubbles of belief systems. You could just look at Germany and the Nazis and Hitler and look at that rigid, narrow-minded perspective of things and see how millions of people were swayed by this. Even if a very real part of them didn't feel good about it, they attributed their fear to, or their anger and stuff to, it's someone else's stuff, it's not mine, it's because of these people. We're always looking outside of ourselves. We think that there's this evil force, and I'm not saying there aren't dark forces, but how much power do they really have, and how much power do we want to give them? So like I said, if you believe that the devil can take souls away forever and stuff like that, and that God casts souls into hell for eternal punishment, the devil's winning and been winning for a long time. Basically all of human history that's been recorded. And that doesn't paint a very good picture of this all-powerful, all-loving, all-merciful, omnipotent, omnipresent God. We need to examine these beliefs. We need to decide if it feels good to believe them. The reason I left my faith when I was 18, 19, 20 was because I didn't get answers that felt right to me, to my heart. Do you think God would give us a heart that couldn't feel good about our most important beliefs? Do you think that's intelligent design? I really don't think it is. It doesn't feel right. And feeling is more important than thinking. The mind is where the fear center is. The mind is the only thing that can create and feel fear. Like, yeah, you may feel the effects of the mind's fear in the body, but the fear always originates up here. It's the only place where fear can even come from, in the body. So how much power are we giving our thoughts? The only time we're afraid of anything is when we think that this is something to be afraid of. Think this is bad, think this is wrong, think this is evil. It's never our heart telling us it's wrong or evil or bad. It's our mind. And so what's the real enemy? Is it these outside forces? Or is it just your own mind that doesn't yet understand itself? I hope that you will examine your beliefs more carefully, that you won't let fear stop you. Fear has no right to control you. Fear has no right to keep you stuck in any one perspective. God's love is unconditional. And if you look for it, if you try to find that and find out why that could be, I guarantee you, without fail, you will find it if you stay persistent. And that is what will allow you to let go of all shame, all guilt, all your resentments. That is what will allow you to finally forgive everything. If Jesus came to do anything, it was to release you of your burdens. So stop holding on to them. And if your beliefs have become a burden, then those beliefs can't be right. Not for you. We're here for certain lessons. We're here for certain experiences. We're here to heal. We're here to remember our true selves, who we really are. And when you get to the ultimate truth that everything is oneness, everything is unity, everything is God, it will finally all make sense. You will finally make sense to yourself. And God will finally make sense. The world will finally make sense. And you will know peace. And you will no longer be held down by fear and burden. Because love because God wants you to free yourself. There's only one person you can save in this entire world, and it is yourself, and it can only be done through love. And once you love yourself unconditionally, loving others and loving life and loving everything else becomes so natural, so easy. And it lifts all burdens. And you'll have no doubt, because you will develop a knowing through your faith. Faith produces knowings. Have faith that the truth of who we are and who God is so much more beautiful than you can currently imagine. It's more beautiful than I can currently imagine. And I've imagined a lot. I urge you, with love, to look at these things. All right. I love you guys unconditionally. Thank you for watching. Have a blessed day.